Okay, so I did my project on The Rainmaker by N. Richard Nash. Okay, so some historical context. The play was written in the 1950s. However, it was set in the 1930s, the Depression era, and it said it was set in Western America. It didn't specify where, but we can surmise from the dialogue, the language, that it was most likely in the South. So in the world of the play, the town is suffering from a severe drought that's been happening for a long period of time. Their crops and cattle are dying, and they're really hoping for some rain. So the set design would be really simple. It's just an old farmhouse and a barn, kind of run down. And the clothing would also be reminiscent of the 1930s in America. The entire country was suffering at this time, and people were trying to provide for their families. And on top of that, environmental stressors were happening as well. So in the 1950s, however, when Nash wrote the play, the economy was on the rise. It was post-Depression, post-World War II. So there was recovery and growth happening in the nation. So some values in the 1950s that were represented in society at the time were family, hard work, and prosperity. Similar values in the 1930s, family, survival, mostly, and prosperity. And in the 1950s, the American dream, the concept of the American dream emerged. So the American dream was a house, white picket fence, regular income, kids, the whole thing. So that stability from financial stress was what people were hoping for. So some textual context for the play. Women were expected to get married by their early 20s or sooner. The main character, Lizzie Curry, she's in her mid to late 20s, so this is something that she's struggling with personally, aside from her familial struggles. And all of the people were struggling to make a living, to put food on the table, and provide for their families. So Nash, he grew up in this Depression era, so he was quite familiar with what it was like. His father left to pursue a career in journalism, so his mother ran their business. It was a grocery store by herself with her older children, so she provided for her family, and somehow she supported her community as well that was struggling during this time. So even though Nash's family wasn't wealthy and they were struggling like everyone else, he pursued his passion for writing. And later on, when he finally wrote The Rainmaker, Lizzie Curry, the main character, she was based off of Nash's older sister. Very independent, headstrong, yet feminine and sweet. So, like I said, the early 1950s, the economy was on the rise, the emergence of the American middle class was happening. So the gap between the very poor and the very rich was closing. The GI Bill was presented, so the government was funding veterans that came back from the war to continue education so they could get better jobs and therefore give back to their communities and the economy as well. And Nash served in World War II. So he wasn't on the front lines, but he was working in the Office of War Information. Some dramaturgical context. The play opened in October 28, 1954 at the Court Theater in New York City, and it only ran for 125 performances. The original director was Joseph Anthony, and it was produced by Ethel Linder. Some glowing reviews were stirring, wonderfully funny, and a classic. And this play, The Rainmaker, it also inspired a similar story in Bollywood or Indian cinema, and a musical on Broadway called 110 in the Shade. So this play is owned by the Samuel French Incorporation. They own the rights of the production. And interestingly enough, this particular play, as popular as it was, appeared in all three mediums: Broadway, motion picture, and television production, as well as onstage play. It was one of his more well-known works. So the concept for the sound design for this show would be very simple. It would be slice of life, nostalgic, very natural, and I would want to bring in focus on the hope and the hopefulness of the people that Nash instills in the characters. So hope, like rain, brings life. So when we have something to hope for, it gives us the courage and the strength to continue. So I would focus on hopefulness, make things simple yet strong, plain yet powerful. So it would be very minimal. The set pieces would be minimal. The lighting would portray like dryness and desolation at the beginning, and then transition towards the end of the play into a cooler, more lush lighting. By the end of the play, it does rain. So it would be very simple, all natural, as much as it could be. So yeah, and those are my sources.